Welcome to Practical Access. I'm Lisa Deeker.
And I'm Rebecca Hines. And Lisa, I may be more excited about today's guest than you are because this is a man of many interests, and I'm a starburst thinker. Who do we have?
We're excited to have with us today Jonte Taylor, who is an associate professor at Penn State. And Jonte, welcome. And you also said we could call you DT, so we're so excited to have you with us today. Thanks.
Oh, no, it's great. I'm super excited to be here and to have a conversation with another Starburst.
So, I will start with the questions. So, in our little pre-recording, we were talking about bringing back the E into the A into the stems and getting out to the steam of it. So Lisa and I this season have been talking about math and talking about science. Can you bring out that A for me a little bit? What are we missing right now in the science and the math and the conceptualization of it all together?
Sure. Like for me, when I think about it, and I'm mostly science. I am math adjacent, but definitely science. And it's thinking about it from a broader perspective. So we always talking about, universal design for learning with UDL. But even beyond that, when you think about the arts and how, that's what the A is the arts. We should be thinking about the arts as part of a multimodal representation because it is a visual representation of something. And we can make it as kind of connected, disconnected, associated as we want, whether it's whatever type of art you decide, performing arts, writing arts, visual arts, music arts, all of these different things. And I think the real issue is, or the real kind of way to look at it is understanding the arts beyond kind of, for those who are art teachers and teaching artists, they know what I'm talking about because there are standards for arts education. We should be incorporating those standards as well into our science standards too. And, the idea of multimodal representation isn't new or even controversial. It's just, I think we don't always think about the arts as multimodal representation.
And the arts are abstract thinking. They're different
Absolutely.
interpretations, which exactly is what science is about.
Absolutely. And we don't leverage it enough. And one of the things that I am lucky, if you're not familiar, is happening. The CEC is doing their professional development fair, and one of the divisions of the arts, is going to have a conversation about art utilization, and within kind of a STEAM framework. So that should be really cool.
That's very exciting. And the thought of adding that visual representation and that UDL is really important. And I really enjoyed that whole concept of STEAM. And as you said, as a science expert, I'm curious about your thinking about, because I know you did work with a postdoc in this area. How do you best get all kids? And then I think Becky's got some specific areas to ask you about. How do we get all kids in more inquiry-based inclusive settings in science for success? That's what your work is really focused on, is not just them being present, but them being present and being successful in science. What are some of your tips you'd give me as if I were a new science teacher for the first time and I've got a caseload of students that I'm like, I'm not sure where to start? What would you suggest?
I think one of the things we have to start with is engagement. How do we define engagement? What does engagement look like? And it looks different for students depending on where they are. We have to meet them where they are. And if we're meeting them where they are, then that means we have to adjust and have a broader, more flexible idea of what engagement can look like. Because we also have to, and I think this goes across the board, not just for science teachers, but also special educators. Like, how are we thinking about science in general? So what all the things that we do in life are science related. Like literally everything. What do we eat? What do we drink? What the clothes we wear? All these things. So if we think about science in that kind of way, you know, then we can have a student who's a little bit more severe end of the need spectrum. And like, okay, well, we're doing a lesson on um, kind of creating your own menus and what to buy and shop. That's a science lesson too, because they still have to eat healthy, and what does that mean health wise, which is again related to science. So what we intake, how it comes out, we can use the regular terms for that, but all of that is science. So I like to think about science across the entire spectrum of kind of students that we serve and in needs. Sometimes we tend to focus on like quote unquote high incidence disabilities, or just certain students can be in science classrooms, and I think that's a bit of a misnomer. We can do a lot more in the science space if we give students a chance. Even students who are more moderate, being in engineering classes or learning the principles of engineering. Will they build skyscrapers? Probably not, but that's okay. They don't have to. They can still kind of learn some of the principles of engineering, whether it's how pulley systems work or leverage. All of those things kind of matter. And, we have to be braver as teachers to want to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
Let's.
think I think all teachers want to do it. Let me be or during space. It's just I don't know if we prepare them in the right way
we,
to do
we
it.
all I hear is that Lisa, we got to create more brave teachers. So, and speaking of brave teachers, I know that we share an interest in supporting those kids who take a little more from teachers, and kids with EBD specifically. They are sometimes the ones who need the interaction and the really high interest activities that a science class can offer. But they're also, research wise, they're the ones that teachers are most reluctant to
Absolutely.
include. So what would you say to teachers who are like, you know what, I really want to have a highly active classroom and I want to be able to do these things, but I've got 4 kids with EBD in there, so we can't do it. What would you tell them?
Oh, I would tell them first things first, if you have access to it, there's research that tells us about this, right? Particularly for kids with EBD. So Lisa mentioned the work that I did as a postdoc. One of the things that I was able to do as a postdoc with Bill Therian and some other people I was working with, Brian Hand, um, was we put together like a meta-analysis of kind of effective instruction for EBD in science, right? And the saddest part about that, I mean, it was great. The paper's fine, it's out there, whatever. But the saddest part about that is we went back to the 80s to like 2010 or 11 or whatever it was. And we were able to find, I think, maybe 11 articles on
Right.
EBD students in learning science, actual science.
Right.
And I was like, that's a lot of time and not a lot of articles. Uh, so that's one that we're clearly not doing it, as you mentioned. Two, I think we have to be braver and understand our students. I can tell stories from working with EBD and doing science. You can tell stories, Rebecca, for doing EBD and science. One of my favorite dudes in the world, um, uh, oh my goodness, Ben Ryden, who was a former doc student of mine, but he's doing great work at JMU. He was an EBD teacher. He could tell you stories about doing science in his classroom, and all of us can share the same thing. Our students were probably left out of general science classrooms, and
Right.
then we had to do the science in our spaces, whatever spaces we had. And one of the things I think that happens in general, teachers in general are more nervous about working with kids with EBD because of reputation and so forth and so on. Is like, if you know your kids, right, then you can probably make this work because you know what the things that trigger them and when they're having good days and bad days. Yes, there are beakers in science, depending on the type of science that you're doing. And yes, there's always concern when working with glass, with any kids. That doesn't mean it should be any more or less with kids with EBD. It's just knowing it's like, okay, Jack is having a bad day today. Maybe no beakers today, but beakers tomorrow. And that's okay. That's more than okay. Um, it's part of it is training. Part of it is comfortability, being comfortable doing it. And part of it is knowing your students. You know, a combination of all these three things should get you in a good place to start doing science experimentation in your classroom. Science are in a lot of people are afraid of the word argumentation because, you know, part of science is argumentation, debate. It's like, well, a kid at EBD, they'll debate and then fight over science. I'm not even mad if they fight over science. Like, you know, they're like, at least it's over science. But there are ways to have that also under control and make that happen in a manner that's going to be productive for all kids, all of them. So, you know, there are different things that we can do on the teacher prep side. There are things that we can do on the professional development side, and there are things that we can do on the instructional side as far as how we are instructing kids to get everyone involved. Because inclusive science, the key word is inclusive. So if we're being not inclusive, that's exclusive. So, you know, words matter.
I really enjoy your passion and your comments, JT. I think it's spot on. So our last question for you really would be one that I'm a new teacher. I'm assigned as a special ed teacher to co-teach with the 20-year best science teacher of the year, and I'm scared. What would be your advice to go in and start with as the person who's supposed to be the expert in kids with differences, meeting the person who really, really knows the science content? Where would I start?
I think this is a really good place for that, thinking about that UDL approach, where if we're going to do any kind of thing that for students with disabilities, it's probably going to benefit all students, right? So it's not going to be this quote unquote extra thing that we're doing. It's going to be something that's all students are going to be able to use, benefit, and take advantage of that we can do, regardless of what it is. You know, whether it's making something multimodal, it's a visual support, it's an auditory, whatever kind of support it is. So I think going in there beyond the fact that you're just an expert of, say, students with disabilities, you're an expert of accommodation, and you're an expert of adaptation and adapting things, because I think that's a better position to have. Hopefully you're in a true kind of collaborative space, and it's not just, well, those kids are your kids kind of deal, because that's always problematic. These are our kids, and if everyone doesn't feel like they're our kids, then that's a problem. And try to also be, and one of the things that I do run into sometimes is the idea of these kind of inquiry-based classrooms, and you know, where inquiry is just kind of conversational as opposed to some other things, where we know students with disabilities can get left behind or lost. You have to be flexible there, but you also have to let your students be in a place of not knowing. And sometimes special ed teachers are not comfortable with having their kids not know something. It's a balance. And I know people tend to look at inquiry and behavioral as these two separate things, but I look at them as a spectrum. And you go across that spectrum, you know, sometimes you're going to be more inquiry, sometimes you're going to be more direct instruction. And that's, yeah, but it should be flexible. That's the thing. We have to be flexible across that kind of constructivist versus, you know, behavioral space. And that tends to be where the tension lies. And that's what I've been spending the past 10 to 15 years trying to figure out.
Yeah. When you're talking, Jonte, you really the term flexible and behavior and all of these things really lead me to kind of a concluding thought more than a question. I would love to see our science teachers be more intentional about when and how they find support for really specific days or lessons. We all know there's not everybody has a co-teacher, but is there anyone at your school you could say, you know what, Wednesdays, I really want to be able to do more hands-on, but I got some kids in there I'm worried about who in this whole school can come and just be an extra set of hands on Wednesdays from 10 to 10:30 so that kids don't have to be pulled out to do something different and everybody gets a chance to do the same level of science and the same types of hands-on opportunities.
You know, one of the first things I start with when I'm talking to particularly science teachers is I ask them, how are you getting your information in a classroom, active information? And it's like, you know, we're having these conversations and I was like, but what about the shy kids? Maybe they don't even have disabilities. What if they're just shy and or not confident in the answers that they would give, so they don't give answers. So then I introduce stuff like response cards and that just a simple change in how we're receiving information will start that process. So it's, you know, it is a lot of kind of that too.
Right. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us and some great advice and wisdom. And I think equity, access, and opportunity and UDL, you got them all in there. We really
I do love that.
and you really do have some wonderful thoughts in the field. So we appreciate your voice and your thoughts. And if you have any questions, please send us an email send us a tweet at Access Practical, or you can send us a post on our Facebook page, Practical Access. Thank you again for joining us. We appreciate it.
Awesome. This was awesome. This is great.
Great talking with you.
Thanks, absolutely. John.